Weak and wounded sinner, lost and left to die. Oh, raise your head, for love is passing by. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus and live.
Now your burden's lifted, carried far away, and the precious blood has washed away the stain. So sing to Jesus, sing to Jesus, sing to Jesus and live.
Like a newborn baby, don't be afraid to crawl. And remember, when you walk, sometimes we fall. So fall on Jesus, fall on Jesus, fall on Jesus and live.
Sometimes the way is lonely and steep and filled with pain. So if your sky is dark and pours the rain, then cry to Jesus, cry to Jesus, cry to Jesus and live.
Oh, and when the love spills over and music fills the night, and when you can't contain your joy inside, then dance for Jesus, dance for Jesus, dance for Jesus and live. With your final heartbeat, kiss the world goodbye, and go in peace and laugh on glory's side. And fly to Jesus, fly to Jesus, fly to Jesus and live.
Fly to Jesus, fly to Jesus, fly to Jesus and live. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Let's pray over this broadcast. Got a little bit of technical issues with one of the broadcasts, so hopefully it will be all well. So I'm going to turn the music off on station head, and we're going to pray. Lord Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today, Lord. We ask for blessings upon every single person that comes into the broadcast. Lord, I just thank for the time and opportunity to be able to do this broadcast, be able to share your word, Lord, and just be able to hopefully touch somebody's heart so they can be led to you, Lord, so we can continue to grow the kingdom, Lord. Lord, I just ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name, we pray. Amen and amen. I saw a prayer request from Mary Dennis. Mary, for a person who's in ICU, complete totally, and walk out healed. Please pray. Lord, we pray for this person who's in ICU. Lord, we just ask for healing in Jesus' mighty and powerful name. Lord, we ask for a miracle, Lord. Let the ICU, let them be in ICU and it all be cleared. Lord, let there be no more pain, no more suffering. Lord, allow that person to be able to get up and walk out of that hospital. In Jesus' mighty and powerful name, we pray. Amen and amen. Love it all from tonight. What's up? Matt Martin's in the house. Thanks so much for joining. I'm going to get a share out here real quick to the SGE group to make sure that they know we're on. And, yep, so tonight we're broadcasting on it. Hey, what's up, Edwin? What's up, man? Who am I? You know what? We should probably do that. Let's do that tonight. All right. Bless you guys. Bless all you guys. Let's see what we got going on. Let's do this. All right. So, who am I? I am Jason Wallace. I'm a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. I'm a prayer warrior. I'm an intercessor. I'm a Bible reader. I'm a devoted husband and father. I am a child of God. I am a new creation in Christ. I am a citizen of heaven. I am a member of Christ's body. Welcome, Stephen. Thanks so much for joining. I am a friend of Christ, and I am righteous and holy. And listen, so are you, as long as you believe in Jesus Christ, for sure. Alrighty, thanks for whoever's watching over on Facebook. Thank you so much for taking a watch. And guys, thanks for all of you guys who are joining on all the different platforms tonight. I don't know what's going on with DLive. I'm gonna have to go take a little peek and see if it's actually streaming, because I don't think it is. That's what we're gonna do right now. Hopefully I don't crush it. Let's go to DLive. So while we're doing that, I am going to get us started with our forgot to mention, check out the Jesus Did It website so you can find. Hey, how's it going, Barbara? Thanks so much for joining. Right there is the download, the red arrow, the affirmations. You definitely want to download that and print it out, put it with your Bible. Also take a look at the other great broadcasters there in the middle, and then right down below that is the people that we like to watch. And yeah, check them out, see if you like them too. Some really, really good people on Periscope and other platforms as well. I've been meaning to talk to Pastor Rick about that, about the other platforms. So we probably should have some links up there for the rest of them. But in the meantime, if you want to follow me on any of the other social media, you can go right down there, right where it says linktr.ee/JasonRWallace7, and you can follow me. Where's JR? I have no idea, man. I have not seen JR in probably a month, maybe a month. Alright, so something wrong with that computer. It's streaming. I'm okay. Alright, DLive is good, so it's streaming. Alright, we shut it down because it's going to crush that computer. That's right. And I will always love you. Hey, you. How's it doing? Thanks for joining on the broadcast. Thanks for joining and being part of this Jesus Did It broadcast. I'm sorry. Time to get the tea out. Oh, good old Starbucks tea, man. None better right now. Except for that one place I had some bubble tea thing, and that was pretty cool too. Alright, so, what are we doing? What is that thing? Oh, okay. I'm like, what is this thing up here? There we go. I don't have my picture. Where's my... There we go. Alrighty. All this silliness is here. And... of course it doesn't show the page, right? Of course not. We gotta tell it to see the page for some reason today. That's alright. Smeal. I'm working. Chat screen. Where is it? Hey, where's the page at? Maybe it's this one. Boom, boom, boom. There it is. Alright, alright, alright. I know Jesus Christ. You know Jesus. What? You know Jesus Christ? I know him too. He's a friend of mine. Dana Lee, thanks so much for joining on the broadcast. We're about ready to get into some praise, right? Definitely some praise. We're going to sing tonight song from that our friend Edwin really likes over on Periscope. Oh, by the way, that leads me to say, all right, for you guys that are watching me and you're like, hey, how's it going? Bill Doyle is on. Bill, I didn't know you were on live.me. Thanks so much for joining. Speaking of which, so if you happen to see me talking to some people and you're like, why is he responding to some things? Is this a video or is this like not live? Or no, it's live. We're going streaming on a lot of different broadcasts because we want to get the word of God out to as many people as possible. And you know, why not use the technology for God's glory, right? So we're broadcasting on YouTube, YouNow, Live.me, DLive.io, Periscope, Facebook, Twitch, Smashcast, FC2, Peaks, Instajib, Vaughn Live, Afrika TV, and I actually found out Afrika TV is actually a Korean place, which is really interesting. I never knew that. It's Korean. What's up, Beast? X Gamer is back in the house. Thanks so much for joining, friend. OK.ru, we're out for our friends in Russia, and we're also broadcasting on Stationhead for our audio only stream. And we're seeing how that thing's working out. You know, what's there? So there. All right, so our song for today. Let's pick a song. We said we were going to do Edwin's song, so we're going to do Who Am I? And I'm pretty sure I've sung that a couple times. But I don't know. Should we do the Edwin version? I don't know. Should we do the Edwin version? It's been a while since I played the Edwin version. Let's see. I'll have to go back pretty far. Yeah, we want to do the Edwin version? Alright, we have to find it. That's back some ways. I don't know what. That's like last year. I cannot believe that I've been singing on this thing for 2 years. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Alright, so let's do Control F. We're gonna find Who Am I? Who am I? There's me. There's Diane Crow. James Styles. Me. Huh. Is this the one? Can't be. No, because it doesn't have any extra ones. Is that the one? It would say like with a whole bunch of other people. Oh, with 4 singers. I think this is the one. Yep. This is the one. Alright, here we go. Let me turn it on.
Right.
God bless you.
Who am I that the Lord of all the earth would care to know my name, would care to feel my hurt? Who am I that the bright morning star would choose to light the way when we're ever wandering on? Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow. A wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling. Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you told me who I am.
bless you guys.
Who am I that the eyes that see my sin would look on me with love and watch me rise again? Who am I that the voice that calmed the sea would gather through the rain and calm the stormy in me? Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow. A wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling. Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you don't need me who I am. I am yours.
I'm yours, Lord. Yes. Hallelujah. Praise God. Praise God. He loves you so much.
Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow. A wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling. Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you told me who I am. I am yours.
I'm yours, Lord.
I am yours.
I'm only yours, Lord.
I am yours. I am yours. I am yours.
Who shall
Who shall I
Nobody.
fear?
Nothing.
I am yours.
No fear.
I am yours.
Thank you, Jason. God bless you, brother.
Thanks for singing with me, buddy.
God bless everyone.
God bless you.
Just
Bless God.
remember who
God
am
bless us
I?
all.
I
And bless
am
me.
the Holy One.
God bless.
Hallelujah. Praise God.
Oh, that was Who Am I? And we sang that with Israel Wendy, a couple SGE friends, and even Kayla. I haven't seen Kayla in a while on the broadcast, but she was on there too. Hey, Renee Isherwood, thanks so much for joining from down the road. Thanks for being here. And yeah, that's today's worship song, right? Our praise. You know, just knowing who you are. Right? It's really important to know who you are, because you know he's told us what we are in the Bible, and we really have to believe this, because if not, you know, you're gonna be lost, right? You're not gonna know who you are. I mean, that's tough. I would not want to be in a position where I don't know who I am. And, you know, just like that. Everything. Hold on a second. Broadcasting. Great. 1 second, guys. I might have to put you on. Hold on. We have an incident. Be right down. Alright, give me a second. Alright guys, I'm gonna put a song on and I will be right back, okay? I'm sorry about this, but it is important. We have something spilled, so I gotta go clean that up real quick. Help her clean up. Alright, give me a moment. Oh, hello, Seeker of the Truth. Thanks so much for joining and sharing out a whole bunch of people. That is a wow. Yeah. Thanks for being here, guys. And I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go put some music on for you guys, and then I'll be right back. So let's do that. Looks like my live.me stream just broke. Maybe they kicked me out again. Alright, live.me, I'll be right back with them guys. Let me put that music on for you guys, and we'll do that. Let's see. Nice long song. What's gonna be a nice long song? Actually, you know what I could do? Yeah. Yeah, let's do... This is a really nice long song, for sure. Alright guys, I'll be right back. I'm so sorry about this. I'll be right back.
The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now his feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty. The radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to Him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.
Welcome, Oida. Thanks for joining on is that Facebook. Thanks so much for joining. And we have a couple other people here. Hey, Sue. Thanks for joining. All right, I turned the broadcast off on over on Station Head. Actually, I didn't mean to. It cut off on its own. And I'm not sure if this is gonna, if I got kicked off of Live.me or if it was just something else going on with it. I'm not sure. We're gonna try it again. And I'm gonna try it here. Now you're here. Thanks for joining, Bill. I appreciate it. Okay, so now that crisis has been averted and we are back in business over here and back on track, and so alrighty, so today's Bible reading is from Psalm 78. Alright. Okay, thanks for letting me know that. Alright, welcome back. So much for joining. Alrighty, so we are talking Psalm 78. Wow, we're getting pretty far. Thanks so much for joining on this journey from Genesis to Revelation, one chapter at a time. We're getting pretty far in the Bible here. This is pretty good. Okay, so we use the Blue Letter Bible, and I use the New King James Version. The version that I normally read is the Amplified, but they don't have an Amplified version on this website. This website is so cool because we can find out what a lot of different words mean and go right down to the root of the word, so you can try to understand what the word really means. And when we come in here and we want to understand what does this mean, or what is the word here, or if there's any words that are stuck out like we don't know how to say them. So let's see, I don't think there's any words in here that this is a pretty plain English one, but when we run into it I'll show you that you can just very easily, actually, you know what, there was a word at the top, let's do that. So this word here, we don't know what this word means, right? We don't know what it is, how it is, right? So if we go to here, we can say, this is it in the whole verse in the Hebrew. We can also go ahead and listen to it, the words. So if I wanted to hear what this
Strong's
means.
H623. Asaph.
Asaph. So we can understand the words, right? And what they mean here in Hebrew as well. So it's really cool. You can get really into the word a little bit deeper, using this tool. So it's pretty cool. And they've got like cross references and commentaries and other things like that. So it's pretty neat tool to be able to help learn a little bit more. So let's get into the word for tonight. So today's word is Psalm chapter 78, and it's a contemplation of Asaph. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. God's kindness to rebellious Israel. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, telling to the generation to come the praises of the Lord, and his strength and his wonderful works that he has done. For he established testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, the children who would be born, that they may arise and declare them to their children, and they may set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and may not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that did not set its heart aright, and whose spirit was not faithful to God. What's up, Toby Wade? Thanks so much for joining. Alright, where were we? I derailed myself. Alright, not faithful to God. The children of Ephraim, being named and carrying bows, being armed and carrying bows, turned back to the day of the battle. They did not keep the covenant of God. They refused to walk in his law, and forgot his works, and his wonders that they had shown them. Marvelous things he did in the sight of their fathers, in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea, and caused them to pass through, and made the waters stand up like a heap. That's a long one today. There we go. In the daytime also, he led them with the cloud, and all night with the light of fire. He split rocks in the wilderness, and gave them drink in abundance like the depths. He also brought streams out of a rock, and caused waters to run down like rivers. But they sinned more against him, by rebelling against the Most High in the wilderness. And they tested God in their heart, by asking for food of their fancy. Yes, they spoke against God. They said, Can God prepare a table in the wilderness? Behold, he struck the rock, and the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide meat for his people? Therefore the Lord heard this, and was furious. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they did not believe in God, and they did not trust in his salvation. Yet he commanded the clouds above, and opened the doors of heaven. He rained down manna on them to eat, and given them of the bread of heaven. Men ate angels' food. He sent them food to the full. He also caused an east wind to blow in the heavens, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He also rained meat on them like the dust, feathered fowl like the sand of the seas. And he let them fall in the midst of their camp, all around their dwellings. So they ate, and they were well filled. For he gave them in their own desire. They were not deprived of their craving, but their food was still in their mouths. But while the food was still in their mouths, the wrath of God came against them, and slew the stoutest of them, and struck down the choice men of Israel. In spite of this, they still sinned, and did not believe in his wondrous works. Therefore, their days he consumed in futility, and their years in fear. Crazy. When he slew them, then they sought him. When they returned and sought earnestly for God, then they remembered that God was their rock, and the Most High God their Redeemer. Nevertheless, they flattered him with their mouth, and they lied to him with their tongue, and he knew it probably. For their heart was not steadfast with him, nor were they faithful in his covenant. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity, and did not destroy them. Yes, many a time he turned his anger away, and did not stir up all of his wrath. For he remembered that they were but flesh, a breath that passes away, does not come again. How often they provoked him in the wilderness, and grieved him in the desert. Yes, again and again they tempted God, and limited the Holy One of Israel. They limited him. That's crazy. They did not remember his power, the day when he redeemed them from the enemy, when he worked his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan, turned their rivers into blood, and their streams they could not drink. He sent swarms of flies among them, and devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. He also gave their crops to the caterpillar, and their labor to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost. He also gave up their cattle to the hail, and their flocks to a fiery lightning. He cast on them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, indignation, and trouble, by sending angels of destruction among them. That's really interesting. That's interesting. He made a path for his anger. He did not spare their soul from death, but gave their life over to the plague, and destroyed all of the firstborn in Egypt, the first of their strength in the tents of Ham. He made his own people go forth like sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. And he led them on safely, so that they did not fear. But the sea overwhelmed their enemies, and he brought them to his holy border, the mountain which his right hand had acquired. He also drove out the nations before them, allotted them in the inheritance by survey, and made the tribes of Israel dwell in their tents. Yet they tested and provoked the Most High God, and they did not keep his testimonies, but turned back and acted unfaithfully, like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow. For they provoked him to anger with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their carved images. When God heard this, he was furious, and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he had forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent he had placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity, and his glory into the enemy's hand. He also gave his people over to the sword, and was furious with his inheritance. The fire consumed the young men, and their maidens were not given into marriage. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Then the Lord awoke as from a sleep, like a mighty man who shouts because of wine. He beat back his enemies. He put them to a perpetual reproach. Words are a little tough tonight. Sorry, it's a long one. Moreover, he rejected the tent of Joseph, and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. And he built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth, which he has established forever. He also chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes that had young. He brought them to shepherd Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart, and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. Wow. Some interesting words in there, man. Whew. Some stuff there. You don't realize how deep, right? I guess we sometimes just don't realize how deep, that and how much. I'll tell you what, I am very thankful for Jesus, because could you imagine having the wrath of God come on you like that, to cause all of your things to be, what's going on, Stalker Chance? All of your fields to be destroyed, all of your animals to be destroyed. Crazy. But that's why we got Jesus, because Jesus is the answer, right? He fixed what we were breaking and we just couldn't do. Thank you, Jesus. Alrighty. So every night, that was a long one. Sorry about the longness of that one. 12:15. Oh my goodness, we need to hurry up. That's gonna be a late one. All right, guys. So every night we broadcast. We read the Our Daily Bread. Our Daily Bread's a free publication. You might be able to get it at your church. If not, take a look at the website, odb.org, and it's a great free devotional that you can get on all different ways. You can get an app. You can get. Looks like we're not going to make numbers of viewers tonight. So, all right, let's get into it. So today, for Sunday, June 9th, the title is Abby's Prayer. And this is written by Dave Brannon. When Abby was a sophomore in high school. She and her mom heard a news story about a young man who'd been critically injured in a plane accident. An accident that took the lives of his father and his stepmother. Although they didn't know this person, Abby's mom said, "We just need to pray for him and his family." And they did. Fast forward a few years, one day Abby walked into the class at her university. A student offered her the seat next to him. That student was Austin Hatch, the plane crash victim Abby had prayed for. Soon they were dating, and in 2018 they married. "It's crazy to think that I was praying for my future husband," Abby said in an interview shortly before they were married. It can be easy to limit our prayers to our own personal needs and for those closest to us, without taking the time to pray for others. However, Paul, writing to the Christians in Ephesus, told them to pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all of the Lord's people. And in 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 1 tells us to pray for all people, including those in authority. There it is. Let's pray for others, even people we don't know. It's one of the ways we can carry each other's burdens. Sorry. So the question here in the bottom says, who are the people, some you may know, you may not even know personally, who need your prayers today? How will you carve out some time to talk to God about their needs? Amen. Prayer for today, I think, is prayer. Jesus, open my heart to the needs of the people around me, even those I don't know. Take my heartfelt concern and intervene for them as only you can. Amen. Alright, so today's reading was from Ephesians chapter 6 verses 16 through 20, and the key verse for today is 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 1. I urge you that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people. Boom. That is it. Alright. Okay, guys, have any prayer requests or praise reports? Please please throw them up there. We'd love to pray for you. Let me just say the chat stream is ready. Alright. Okie dokie, let's see. Oh, she needs help getting the ice pack. That was 20 minutes ago. Okay. Any prayer requests? Praise reports? Anything? That's good. You know that, if we don't have any, that's okay. You know? Hey Diane, thanks so much for joining. Yeah. Because it's getting late. I'm going to shut it down early tonight anyways. Prayer requests, praise reports, anything like that. If you'd like, you can send me an email, jason@jesusdidit. Okay. Pray for God guides over your good when everything is good. Exactly, I'll take that. Listen, that's one thing. Once you get the connection and you're praying and you are talking to God and you're hearing His voice, that's what, that's what is important, right? You don't necessarily always need other people to pray for you. It's nice to bring all of our concerns together, but you got to make sure that you're talking to the man upstairs too. It doesn't got to be, some great, very worded a prayer. It can just be, hey God, how's it going? How are you doing? Lord, thank you for what you've done for me, and thank you for what you're continuing to do. And Lord, we just ask for whatever it may be, right? He wants to hear your heart, your inside, right? Whatever is, He wants to carry your burdens, right? He wants to listen to Him. Yeah, He may already be able to know, but hey, He still doesn't want a bunch of robots down here. He wants us to be, it's, how did someone describe it? He's a jealous God that wants us to worship Him. And that's why He made us. He made us to worship Him. And, that's why in the old stories, right, we read in the Old Testament, that's when He's, He gets mad, right? You hear all those things about how angry God is, right? I'm thankful that He finally said, that's all right, I had enough. You guys just can't do it yourselves, apparently. And I got to come down and show you what to do. And show you who and what. So let's pray for Awida. Lord, we lift up Awida tonight. Lord, we just ask that God continues to, that you continue to guide her. Lord, we just ask that you continue to give her the vision and direction that she needs for her life, Lord. Lord, we know that she has a lot of responsibilities now. Lord, we just ask that you continue to show her the way that you want her to go, where you want her to be. Lord, if it's whatever it is, Lord, let her know, so that we give her clear direction, Lord, so she can continue to move forward and continue to work towards showing other people what it means to be a true follower of you. So we ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name we pray. Amen and amen. All right. Sorry, I don't know what you said over there. Not sure what this guy said. It was in Arabic. Alright. Any more prayer requests or praise reports? I'm trying to get the DLive chat stream to show up. And I'm working on Facebook. Well, Facebook's already kind of integrated now, which is good. My page, Facebook page, so that one's there. No problem. Amen, amen. And so that's kind of cool. I just like to get DLive working, and those would be good. Let's see. Just check my email real quick, because sometimes somebody sends me an email. Oh, looks like my Smashcast is working again. That's good, that's good. My post could be reaching more people. Okay. I'm not gonna pay you $30. It will happen. It will happen. Alright, alright. Anybody else? What the heck? I just paid $46 or something? I think that's an old email message. Alright, what's going on? Trip, thanks so much for joining. If you guys have any prayer requests or praise reports, please throw them in the chat stream. We'd love to pray for you. Yep, doesn't look like that is gonna work. Alright. I don't know, I'm looking for a new audio stream that the app is not that it works. So I'm trying to find a new audio stream to use, because there is some people that like to listen to the live stream, and they're at work and they can't watch a video. So trying to find a way of doing that so we could try to reach more people. So I don't know, I've looked at like Anchor FM, but that's like a podcast. I'm trying to find some good solutions. So I'm working through those. Hopefully we'll get it figured out. It's a couple of them been looking at. So you listen to your podcast on Luminary. Don't know if they do anything like that. I'll have to take a look and see. Luminary. Yeah, there's a couple of different ones that do it. The problem is that I can do podcasts. I mean, I could put it up on iTunes or Anchor FM or any one of those ones. Luminary. I'll take a look at that Luminary one. Let me actually write that one down here. Luminary. Luminary podcast. Interesting. I'll have to see if they got a live function. I'll have to see. But yeah, if they had a live function, that'd be really cool. Otherwise, I might have to take them and put them in iTunes, into a podcast for iTunes. So we'll see. But yeah, that's my latest endeavor, along with trying to get the chat streams to come together. It's always a feat to bring those things there. What's up, B Spot? Thanks so much for joining on the broadcast. Mr. Peppermint, thanks for being here. I lost station head for today, and that's the one reason why I want is one, I could take one of the computer programs and just stream it out to it and not have to worry about whether an app or I get a phone call or something happens. Looks like Live.me has allowed me to stay on now, so that's good. They kicked me off before because I wasn't gaming, even though I had my category set as chatting. So I don't know why. But alright. Looks like we don't have very many prayer requests, and that's alright. That's alright. So, I guess here we go. So if your church or your business or you yourself need to have an effort to want to do live streaming, let me know. If you need coaching, things like that. Do you have parts that you need done, things that are done, things that aren't done? You have a computer, you don't have a computer, you have all these questions about, there's so many different things and ways of doing it. It's so hard to figure out what to do. So that's where I come into play, and I come and help you. And no, I'm not a great big price for that either. So send me an email. Let's get talking. We can. I need to work on streaming all your live streams to be all together. Yep, absolutely. So if you need help with that, send me an email. We'll talk about it. We'll pray about it, obviously, and we'll talk about your budgets and see what you got going on, and whatever it may be. If it's something real simple and easy to do, who knows? Maybe I'll just do it for nothing. Just because. But any money that would be made from this type of thing, goes right back into this ministry, because I need a new computer, because this ones are starting to fail. So if I could make any way to make the extra money to pay for that computer, that would be excuse me. There we go. Any way to offset that cost of that computer? Hey, being easy to do. Also, on the welcome on your first day on Periscope. Thank you so much for joining. If you hadn't known, it looks like we did have a date, and I gotta go look and see what it is, because it is the 29th at 6:30. So let me go fix that real quick. So on the 29th at 6:30, I gotta double check that date. I hope I can do that date. If not, I'll have to do a recording. It is going to be June 29th. At 6:30 p.m. So different day, different time. So just keep that in mind. There we go. I don't know why this screen can't stay in the right spot. Come on. There we go. There it is. Okay, so this stream is going to be all of us and the Jesus Did It team are going to be sharing our testimonies, about how we were led to Christ. And you can take a look at right there, it's like right there. Gotta use my other hand because the screen is backwards. Right down there at Jesus Did It TV account. Check it out on Facebook and on Periscope, or the two that we broadcast the Jesus Did It accounts to. So definitely you want to take a look at that. And I'm at the end of the road here, so alright. If there's no more prayer requests or praise reports, we're gonna pray on out, and we're going to play some music on the way out, and that'll be it. Thank you so much for joining. I thank you for all your hearts, all of your invites and follows and shares. None of this is for me. I don't want any glory of that at all. I want to take it and lift it up to God. So all those hearts, all those super hearts, all of those thumbs up, likes, and shares, those are all to glorify God. So, I do appreciate it, and I do thank you for that. So, if you guys have any more prayer requests or anything, just throw them in the chat stream. Otherwise, we're gonna pray on out. So, looks like we have how many viewers we got? We're at 129 viewers, so we're not too bad on Periscope. That's okay. Yeah, no big worries. Alright, so let's pray. Lord Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time tonight, Lord. We are so grateful that that the time that we spent was to get into your word and to just share some time with each other. Lord, I know that people could be doing other things, and I do thank them for being here, and I thank you for allowing them to be here. Lord, we take all of this glory to you. Lord, all of these little tokens of appreciation here on this earth, and we lift them up to you. Lord, all the things that people take the time to tap on the screen and all that stuff. We know that every bit of that is for you, and we thank you, Lord, for allowing us to be able to be here and do that. Lord, I thank you for allowing us to pray for our brothers and sisters, Lord, and we just pray for those that we don't know. Lord, we pray for those people that don't know you, just like we read in our devotion tonight. Lord, we lift up those who need the prayer tonight. Lord, if there's anybody that needs healing, Lord, we just ask for your mighty work, Lord, for your miracle to happen. Lord, we ask for those who are going through and struggling mental issues and things like that, Lord, that they be clear to that in your mighty and powerful Son's name. Lord, we just ask for clear direction, for vision, for guidance, for your heart to be imparted into people so they can know who you really are. Lord, we just thank you so much for everything that you do for us. In your mighty and powerful Son's name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, guys. Love y'all. Good night. Be blessed. And we will see you in the next broadcast. Might be tomorrow. Who knows? But I thank you for joining. And let's head on out with some good old music, I think. Let's do that. Gotta find a song though. Let's find one. And amen, amen. Let's see. That one's not done yet. I got a tickle in my throat tonight. You know what? This is where I belong. Let's do that one. I love you guys. Good night. Be blessed.
Sometimes it feels like I'm watching from the outside. Sometimes it feels like I'm breathing. But am I alive? I won't keep searching for answers that aren't here to find. All I know is I'm not home yet. This is not where I belong. Take this world and give me Jesus. This is not where I belong.
So many walls come falling down on me, and when I'm lost in the current of a raging sea, I have this blessed assurance holding me.
All I know is I'm not home yet. This is not where I belong. Take this world and give me Jesus. This is not where I belong. When the earth shakes, I wanna be found in you.
When the lights fade, I wanna be found in you.
All I know is I'm not home yet. This is not where I belong. Take this world and give me Jesus. This is not where I belong. All I know is I'm not home yet. This is not where I belong. Take this world and give me Jesus. This is not where I belong. Where I belong. darkness tries to roll over my bones, sorrow comes to steal the joy I own. When brokenness and pain is all I know, oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
Shame no longer has a place to hide. I am not a captive to these lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. Oh, I will be shaken. No, I will be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
And there's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name.
My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I'm standing in your love.
Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
I'm standing in your
Oh, standing on the rock. Oh, I'm standing in your love.
My light, my strength, my song, this cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm.
What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are stilled, when striving cease, my comforter, my all in all. Here in the love of Christ I stand.
In Christ Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save.
Till on that cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live.
Ground his body lay, light of the world by darkness slain, then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again.
And as he stands in victory, since curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ.
Guilt of life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand. God bless all of you.
Happy
Have
Easter.
a wonderful day.
Thank God for Jesus.
He became sin, who knew no sin, that we might become his righteousness. He humbled himself and carried the cross. Oh, so amazing, love so amazing. Jesus Messiah, name above all names.
sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. His body the bread, His blood the wine, broken and poured out, all for love. The whole earth trembled and the veil was torn. Love so amazing, love so amazing. Yeah. Jesus Messiah, name above all names, blessed Redeemer, Emmanuel, the rescue for sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. All our hope is in you. All our hope is in you. All the glory to you, God, the light of the world, Jesus Messiah, name above all names, blessed Redeemer, Emmanuel, the rescue for sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, the Lord of all. Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. Lord of all. You are Lord of all. He's Lord of all. Thank you for
Amen.
joining.
God bless you.
When he told you you're not good enough, when he told you you're not right, when he told you you're not strong enough to put up a good fight, when he told you you're not worthy, when he told you you're not loved, when he told you you're not beautiful, that you'll never be enough. Fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar.
When he told you you were trouble, you'll forever be alone. When he told you you should run away, you'll never find a home. When he told you you were dirty and you should be ashamed. When he told you you could be the one that grace could never change. Oh, fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears.
Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel.
Oh, let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Oh, fear, he is a liar.
He will take your breath,
Stop you in your steps.
fear,
He is a liar.
he will rob your rest,
Steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar. 'Cause fear, he is a liar.
I'm not a perfect person,
There's many things I wish I didn't do.
but I'll continue learning.
I never meant to do those things to you.
And so I have to say before I go that I just want you to know I found a reason for me to change who I used to be. A reason to start over new. And the reason is you.
I'm sorry that I hurt you.
that I could take it all away
and be the one who catches all your tears. That's why I need you to hear. I found a reason for me to change who I used to be. A reason to start over new. And the reason is you.
and the reason is you.
And the reason is you. And the reason is you. I'm not a perfect person.
I've never meant to do those things to you.
And so I have to say before I go that I just want you to know I found a reason for me to change who I used to be. A reason to start over new. And the reason is you. I found a reason to show a side of me you didn't know. A reason for all that I do. And the reason is you. God bless.
I don't wanna hear anymore. Teach me to listen. I don't wanna see anymore. Give me a vision that you can move this heart to be set apart. I don't need to recognize the woman in the mirror, and I don't wanna trade your plan for something familiar. I can't waste a day. I can stay the same.
I wanna be different. I wanna be changed till all of me is gone, and all that remains is a fire so bright the whole world can see there's something different. So come and be different in me.
And I don't wanna spend my life stuck in a pattern. And I don't wanna gain this world but lose what matters. So I'm giving up everything because I wanna be different. I wanna be changed till all of me is gone, and all that remains is a fire so bright the whole earth can see that there's something different. So come and be different. Oh,
I know that I'm far from
I'm
perfect,
far from perfect, yeah.
but through the cross says I